We're all good to go.
Okay, so this is today about MedTech. We would like to show you the stakeholder-focused innovation approach, which is an approach tailored to the MedTech industry. We will do that because we have observed in some of our MedTech projects over the past 4 or 5 years that there are always similar types of problems. And I would like to highlight them. We have, on the one hand, we see that it's time consuming. Developments in MedTech take a lot of time. We also see that market adoption is partly low or sometimes even slow. The new solutions, it takes a long time to get traction in the market. A third problem that we see in MedTech is that there tends to be often too little value add. I mean, the big jumps in innovation have kind of reduced, and there are very often only minimal low value add innovation, which then leads forth to the lengthy approval process, which sometimes is suboptimal. These are 4 key problems that we see in MedTech, and we would like to reflect about this, how we address this in our approach, which we call stakeholder-focused innovation. It's an adaptation of our jobs to be done approach, which we call CFI, or customer-focused innovation, which we use for all kinds of industry, but this is really tailored to the MedTech industry. Stakeholder-focused innovation, we think the root causes for these 4 problems is a generic understanding of the unmet needs of the different stakeholders. Generic means for us, it's too high level, it's too broad, too abstract, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation. The second, stakeholders in MedTech are very often what you see on the left side. It's the patient, of course. Many companies strive for patient centricity. It's the physician, which very often drives the decision. It's often also in many markets the payer, which are the Krankenkasse, or in the UK, for example, the NHS. But it's also the hospital, administration director of a hospital, or it's the nurse, or the caregivers, the patients. We think the root cause for many innovations that have slow adoption, long development times, are because of this generic understanding. We will show you now in the next few minutes how we address this, how we deepen the understanding with our approach. I hand over to Jan.
So this is where jobs to be done thinking comes in. What does it really mean to go beyond the generic understanding of your stakeholders? And one very important quote that kind of captures the logic that we're also going to show you in a couple of cases later on is this quote, by Ted Levitt: "People don't want to drill, they want a hole in the wall." So this is a logic that we apply when we work in MedTech, which basically means also that, for example, physicians, they don't want to use a specific solution, they don't want to use necessarily a specific pill, but what they want is treat their patients. And really thinking in a stakeholder-focused way means to think in this, have this mindset, to really think about their jobs. So let me give you a little bit more specific and a little bit more concrete what this means for the different stakeholders. So to really get in their minds and their hearts, if you so want, is we start by figuring out and hypothesizing what is the job that they actually have to get done. To get out of this generic understanding, often very solution-oriented understanding as well, we define a couple of jobs that the different stakeholders have. So for example, we had mentioned the Krankenkasse, or the payers in this industry on the upper right, on the upper left, to manage healthcare costs. So that is what they want to achieve. And our innovations should be tailored to actually help with those problems. Understanding the job of your stakeholder is key to move beyond the just purely generic understanding and of your stakeholders. And we will show in...
That's really cute.
Sorry, there's a mic. So if you could... Yeah, if you could please use the chat if you have a question open. Nice. All right, so this is jobs to be done thinking. It's the starting point to getting getting to think in a way like your stakeholders. And we will show you a couple of cases where we apply this logic and what does this actually mean. So that was just the starting point. And here we have a process in 3 steps. So when we use jobs to be done, where we say we go into this really deep understanding of your stakeholder needs, it always starts with need metrics. We will show you in a couple of minutes or maybe even seconds what that really means. It basically means gathering what are the metrics by which your stakeholders measure success. So if, for example, you take a physician and the job is to treat my patient, what are the precise metrics that he or she uses to know whether she can achieve this job or not? So it's completely independent of whatever solution or service that you provide. Next, second step, we go into quantitative validation. We call these value maps, and you will see in a moment what these mean in terms of content. What they reveal is where exactly in the market are the pain points, where in a big market are really those needs which are important but not fulfilled. It's a quantitative step in the process. And in the very end, you actually are able now to define stakeholder-focused requirements that actually address an important need, and that then fits into the product management. So this is the whole process. We will show you in a couple of cases how that actually worked and how this leads to innovations that actually solve these problems that Beat mentioned before. So let's go into a couple of cases.
Thank you. Yeah. The first case is about point-of-care testing. You have to imagine that point-of-care testing is doctors have to diagnose a patient at the point of care. Now they diagnose, for diagnosis, they do tests. They take the vital signs, they take your blood pressure, but they also do blood tests or urine tests or whatever it takes to diagnose a patient. Now they have 2 options. They can, on the one hand, send these samples to a lab and then get the results 24 hours later or maybe faster. Or they can buy a device, a point-of-care testing device, and use that in the practice. Each of the 2 have advantages and disadvantages. This project was about these point-of-care testing devices for example, blood testing. The next slide, please. We start always with the framing. The framing, this is a bit of a complicated chart, but I will explain you in a minute. Framing means who are the stakeholders. In this case, the stakeholders were specialists or general practitioners, doctors on the one hand, and nurses. The example here shows the specialists. Then we create inside out as a hypothesis what we call a needs hierarchy. I mean, you've heard that needs are very typically organized in hierarchies. We also do that, and we say this is a job to be done hierarchy or need hierarchy. In the center of the hierarchy, you have a focus job, which in this case is to diagnose patients and recommend treatment. It's actually 2 focus jobs, if you want. On a higher level, there are the higher level jobs which answer more bigger why questions. Like, for example, a job to run my practice. Every doctor runs his practice or his clinic. But a doctor also wants to help people. That's why he's a doctor. Doctor might also want to make a career. If he's a young doctor, key opinion leader, he wants to make a career, etc. So we structure this higher level job. And then we go 1 level down, where we are closer to what you might know as a customer journey, but it's a job journey, it's solution agnostic, and it goes in this example here from reviewing the patient data before the patient comes to the office, reviewing the patient data, receiving the patient, small talking, up to, okay, do some diagnose test, then order a test, either with the lab or with the nurse. And then when the results come in, to review the results until defining a treatment and explaining the treatment. So we really systematically map that out, inside out as a hypothesis. And then we go with this into exploration, into interviews, which are in-depth interviews, which typically lasts 60 minutes or 90 minutes, where we explore each of the steps. I think there was a question. We continue. Okay. Now here comes an important part. Jobs to be done, in our conviction, does not stop at the job level. What we need to get out of these interviews are what we call metrics, need metrics. A need metrics is an expectation, a criteria that a user or stakeholder has when trying to get the job done. So here you have two examples of such need metrics. For example, we are in the step to order a test. The expectation of the doctor is, that it takes as few steps as possible to order the test. I mean, he has to somehow initiate and order the test, and the criteria he's using is as few steps as possible. Or second example, he orders the test verbally, tells the nurse, order a test, and then it's not put into the medical records. You have to know this project was done in the US. In the US, they have medical records, and they have to do these charts and these medical records. So these are two examples of metrics. We draw them out in the interviews. I think here it was about 42 interviews, half doctors, half nurses. We draw them out and list them and use them afterwards for quantitative survey.
Okay. So the concept of metrics is really important for moving from this, as we mentioned, generic understanding or rather fuzzy understanding to a very concrete understanding. So as Beat mentioned, these metrics, we draw them out in the interviews, but now you have a list, for example, here of 90 metrics. And what do you do with a list of 90 metrics? That's interesting in itself, yes, but you don't know the priority in a given market. So that is where quant comes in. So when we go into a quant, we let physicians and nurses here rate each of these need metrics in terms of importance and satisfaction. I will quickly explain what you're seeing. So you're seeing two different, what we call value maps, which show these tiny little dots. Each of these dots is one of those value metrics or job metrics that Beat explained before. So these very granular, very concrete sentences, each of these dots is one of those. So, and the x-axis on the bottom, so from left to right, shows you the importance. How many people said that this job metric is very important to them or extremely important to them? So we get the extremes. We want to know which of these are really, really important. Up and down, or the y-axis, is how fulfilled are, for example, physicians or nurses with that metric, with the solutions that they currently use. So that's what you're seeing here. Each of these dots is one of those metrics rated by importance and fulfillment or satisfaction by a specific target group. So on the left, on the left, is it the physicians? So we asked here 88 physicians. It's always hard to get more. On the right, 74 nurses in the US who told us of these 90 metrics, which of these are really important and which of these are satisfying. So you can really see the big spread, right? So there is really a difference in how they rated those metrics. Now you can actually go and understand at the very granular level what different stakeholders are telling you. We're just going a little bit into some details about what they told us. So there are shared pain points which the doctor as well as the nurse have. And one of them, so we call these a pain area rather, where a couple of points are the same thing, is about working together, how they interact and how they actually have to work together and things that go wrong there. Another point, which was very nice for the project at hand, was that manual data entry still happens a lot in the doctor's offices, and it's a hassle. So that was a shared pain point by both the nurses and the physicians. So you have that, and of course the other points tell you other things. There is also, for example, very unique pain points. If you look only on the left-hand side at the physician value map, you see that the theme of getting reimbursed, making sure that you actually get your money back from the insurance, was a pain point for them. But of course, that is nothing that nurses necessarily care about. What they, on the other hand, had was an issue very close about testing. So did I do the test correctly or not? Can I trust the result that I actually got? So here you see, you get a very granular, a very clear picture of what is important to your customers or stakeholders and what is really relevant. In the case at hand, it really helped to deliver a very clear direction in the development very early on. They knew which topics they had to focus on, which pain points they had to focus on, which meant fewer iterations, and very tailored value proposition that led to much faster adoption because it actually talks about the problems that they have and experience in their day-to-day life. So that's case one, and I'll switch over to Beat again for case two.
Case two was a fascinating project, like case one as well, but this was especially fascinating. It was about children who have a behavioral disorder, like autism, ADHD, etc. Now, this company wanted to create a solution, a training solution based on virtual reality to train these children in their behavioral disorder and cope with specific situations that stress them or fear them. So this was the project. Now, here we used different stakeholders. And I would like to show you the stakeholders of the therapist, because these children very often go to a therapist on a regular basis, and the caregivers or the parents. Now, we don't go through the whole process, but for the project, we went through the process. We did a framing, we did a qualitative exploration, these in-depth interviews, and then we did the quant, and this is the outcome of the quant, and very interesting insights. Now, the parents worry when they are not with the children. Sounds a bit generic and abstract, no, but it was very concrete because behind this, worried when not with the child, there were a set of pain points which were linked to that. For example, I'm really worried when I'm at work that my child does not speak up when something happens to him or her. Does not speak up. That's really an insight. That was on the caregiver side, which then helped to guide the solution. On the therapist side, it was, of course, a totally different set of pain points or unmet needs, because a therapist has a different job. By the way, the parent's job, focused job, is to raise my child or to help my child cope in difficult situations. Depends where you are on the level. But the therapist was to help the children. Now, the insight on the therapist side was to explain progress of the child that is in therapy with me to the parents. This was a big pain. Parents come, tell, well, is my child progressing? Has he learned, or she learned something? And then it's very difficult for the therapist to show the learning progress. Now, you can imagine how this guides the solution. You can go on the next slide. Again, two very different insights for the two different stakeholders. In the case of the parents, it helped to choose the learning scenarios. All learning scenarios, for example, where the child is alone somewhere out without the parents, they were prioritized over learning scenarios where they are with the family. And it also helped to tailor the value proposition to the pain points. So it allowed to make it quite an emotional value proposition so that the parents adopt faster. For the therapist, totally different insight. First of all, they recognize the importance of the therapist and develop a special module. And this module had, for example, as an example, a tracking functionality to track the progress, which again should help faster adoption in the therapist segment. Case two, what do you think, Jan? Shall we do the third case as well?
Well, we can ask the audience. So if you go to the chat, just put in yes, would like to say case three, or we move on to the Q. So there's a thumb up from Jack. J6, I'm sorry.
It's a very short case.
Yeah. Should we go to case three? I'll say so. Okay. Yes, please. Very good. Okay, thank you, Gina. Okay, let's go to case three. Case three is about cochlear implants. Just a little bit of background on what these are. So these are not per se hearing aids, but these are implants really into the cochlea, which is a part of your ear that make people who were born deaf or with a very hard of hearing hear again. So it's an implant that you put into a part of your ear, and you anchor it on the bone here. Actually, you can see it here with the child. And the case was about these cochlear implants. Just to show you what this jobs to be done perspective, because it is solution free, because it is about the needs of, for example, here patients and the audiologists, and not about the solution itself, can really be a powerful thing for many, many years, because needs stay very, very stable. Of course, depends on the solutions that they have at hand. But if you see here, we did the same process that we mentioned before with patients and audiologists. And the quantitative study here was with 600 patients around the world and 80 audiologists, I think in 2 countries it was. So this really laid the basis, if you look at the patient side here on the top, really laid the basis for a 10-year roadmap of innovations that they put out, and each of those were very, very successful. They based all of their innovations on the map that we're showing here on the left. So they used the inside and just started on the very right, so in the yellow part, if you like, so that's about this part here, and worked their way through up until to the point where it's no longer important to the market. And that gave a 10-year track record of innovations that they successfully put out again and again over a 10-year period. An additional other program was created for the audiologists. We cannot show you this, but I can just tell you that they really liked, so the audiologists really liked what they developed. So in short, what does this bring? Again, 10 years of efficiently produced innovation successes, a really fascinating story. There were much smoother approval processes. It's one thing we haven't talked about that much up until now, but much smoother approval processes, because there was a clear link between quantitative data proving that they meet user needs really, really well, and or usability standards, which has become more and more of a topic in medtech. And because of this clear link between user research and the problem that you found and the requirements that you write, application processors tend to be much faster. Again, the third one, higher market adoption, because the dramatic barrier reduction, you have to imagine really putting an implant into your ear, into your head, or especially for your child, has quite some barriers. So the value proposition that you put out there, the problem that you solve or promise to solve with the solution has to be quite big to overcome these barriers. But that's a snapshot of the results that the third case brought. So to wrap up, what does stakeholder-focused innovation bring? We believe these 4 things. We mentioned the problems before, but if you really, really go into a granular level of understanding the needs at the very beginning of the process, you get a much faster development because you actually have a deep understanding of clinical pathways and just your stakeholder needs, so you know exactly where to focus. You get higher market adoption because you create concepts that really solve a pain point that is there in the whole market, that is relevant in the whole market. You add value where it counts. So again, same thing for the value map. You know exactly where to focus on first. So even there, you know, it can happen that, for example, you get a problem here in the value map that is maybe technically hard to solve, where you really have to create something breakthrough, but you know it's worth it. So you add value where it counts. And on the very last step, so the smoother approval processes, I mentioned this just before, creating this clear link between user research or usability research and the requirement, that speeds up the overall process. So that's case 3. If you're wondering how we're doing this crazy TV style thing, this is powered by Nimagna. Just to mention this, it's a company that, as they say, turn, and I hope this was the case, web meetings into TV shows. And they have been so polite as to give us this tool for free, and we're trying it out. I hope you liked it as well.
And by the way, we are not in the studio. No? What you see here is where we are, just like 5 minutes before we starting. So that's the setup, and you can do it with your normal setup at home with your webcam or your iPhone, your iPad. Okay, let's open the session, Q&A session.
Let's open the session.
go on the next slide.
If you have any questions, all right, just make yourself seen or heard in any kind of way, either through the chat or turn on your camera, raise your hand, however you want to do it. Oh, Stephen had a
Stephen, I think he left, but he had a nice question about with all the hypes. I'm not sure there is any successful hearing aid device on the market. I think the hearing aid industry would challenge that. Hearing aids have gone a long way. They're really wonderful wonderworks. I mean, we presented here the cochlea, the implant case, which is, I mean, a fascinating technology, making basically deaf people hear, born deaf or through accidents or illness. And this is really wonderful what hearing aids can do.
Yeah. I think they've improved quite a lot, but it is true. Stephen, do you want to come on mic?
Yeah, sure. I beg to differ. With all the hypes of device, actually test a few of them, not all of them, I have to admit to that. But none of them actually address the fundamental issue of the hearing or communication through hearing. There is some advancement in the medical field, but I don't think the major players really utilize them. Okay, one thing is that even though the digitizing the channel, the frequencies, help a lot by you can basically selectively and amplify or decrease the channels or the frequencies for the receiver. But that's actually is a wrong way to do it. From the physics point of view, the reason a person lost a hearing, for instance, myself has impaired hearing as well because I serve in the military.
Yeah.
Okay, through the fire of the weapons and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And also I did some research through the VA hospitals. There's a much higher percentage. I was actually 40 times the hearing loss in the service people. Yeah,
the VA is like a big thing it's one of the biggest customers usually of hearing aid companies.
Yeah,
in the US. Sad, but it's true.
And but now the hearing actually helped them in the long term. Because when we lost the hearing, the cochlea, the hair inside actually being damaged. Okay, by boosting the energy and to force a person to hear the frequency actually being diminished by its cochlea's capability, actually you introduce long-term harm to the patient.
So Stephen, I think a couple of points, but I think in basic story, you're very right. I mean, hearing aids, they are not yet like the human ear, so they're not where nature is, but they have made a lot of progress on this, and they worked a lot of this, and it becomes much, much more difficult, of course, to make this last step. But I think in general, I agree, and I would say they're not yet like nature, and maybe they will never be. So I don't know. Well, there was another question by, let me scroll just a little bit.
It's the bias. Huh? Can we draw biases from a limited amount of data? This is a very interesting, can we draw conclusions from a limited amount of data without biases? Well, the question is, we say that our methodology really tries to be biased. Can we always 100% be biased? Well, probably not. There is always a bias in there. But there is not limited amount of data. There is in the quant a huge amount of data. For example, we know that when we talk to a stakeholder or user group in 1 hour or 1.5 hours, and we have talked to 15 to 20 people in this user group, we don't learn anything new in terms of new metrics. We've done projects where we talked to 60 users, and we really saw that after 20, that it is a flattening curve. Now, we assume from this, and this also empirical studies show this, that after 20, we have exhausted all the needs that are in the market. What we don't know yet is how important are these needs in the market. And that's the quant. And in the quant, we go much higher. So we go on statistically relevant levels, 1,000. In consumer goods, we go to 1,000, 2,000 responses. Here in medtech, so this is sometimes hard. We cannot go to 1,000 responses because the market is very limited. But then we say if you have 50 responses, that's already giving a certain robustness to draw conclusions. It's better than 1 or 2. I mean, let's face it, most of our clients are used to qualitative research, talk to a few, like 8 users or stakeholders. I mean,
if they do research.
If they do research, and then they draw conclusions from it. We think this is too low, and we have to go up to 50, 100, and the more the better. But there is also a limit. I mean, it doesn't make sense from statistics to go to 10,000. That is just additional cost without additional benefit. Did that answer your question? I don't know who
it was Eugenio, I think.
Was it Eugenio? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much.
There's another question. Can you scroll up a little bit? I think a very interesting one. Can you scroll up a little bit? Martina, are you still here? Do you want to come on mic?
Yes, I am. Hello, I am still here. Yes.
Perfect. So you were asking, can you ask your question maybe?
Yes, so I was curious how this company was able to build 10-year roadmap from one research, because usually 10 years is quite a long time. So it's not clear to me why was this so long. It could be just because really the medical industry things take very long to be approved, or I don't know, maybe there was something else.
Yeah. So the question is, and I know this is because you have a software background. So software, 10 years is like 100, or it doesn't even so. And then you're perfectly right to point this out. Now, one thing that is beautiful about this approach is that relative to the changes in the market, of course, the results stay rather the same. So we have a couple of clients that actually do tracker studies, and they track the changes over time. And it depends on the market. It depends on how quickly new solutions are introduced. But because they are solution free, really about their needs, they tend to be very stable over quite some time. Of course, depending on solutions that have actually were brought into the market that solve some of those pain points. And medical development times are very, very, very long. So 10 years, 5 years, 7 years for a new medtech device. That is quite a normal time scale. Of course, in software, I doubt that we will have results that stay valid for 10 years. The job, so the hierarchy, that won't stay stable independent of the solutions. So whatever solution you provide, and even if you automate the step, that one will still be true in 20 or 30 years. Now, but changes might be there or on the quant level, so on these needs, and they change depending on how quickly a market innovates, basically.
Okay, clear, thanks.
There is a question on the presentation, the way we did the presentation. I mean, maybe a little bit of background. It says, who's asking the question actually?
Wolfram.
Wolfram. Is Wolfram still here?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm about to leave. Thanks for the presentation. It was interesting. I just wanted to give some feedback. It was not pretty sharp, super sharp on my side, but it was better than just seeing the slides. So it was quite, I was feeling like I was with you more than in the normal setup. So yeah.
So you can't see this, but so the creator of this tool is here, and you cannot imagine his happy face when you said this. Thank you. This is Stefan. He created the thing.
We coach him, we help them, and now we volunteered to use it for the first time in the market.
Yeah. And I think the quote is, I'll send you the clip later. All right. So if there aren't any more questions, we're still a bit over time. If you have any questions, then now. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us on this, at least for us, very hot and sunny day.
You get the presentation, of course. You get the video.
Slides, and
video will be posted on the on our website,
on our YouTube channel. You will get everything tomorrow-ish. Thanks for joining us.
Maybe I got a very last question. Jan, you
Sure.
mentioned you have what, 90 metrics?
Yeah.
You know, how many? How can you know? Kind of, if you validate them, do you validate them all of them? I mean, you showed kind of those kind of like, you know, once you have your 2D chart, I mean, you have to have questions, etc., right? Or do you just take over with a subset of those metrics?
No, that is a very good question. Now, you have to imagine that when we do the exploration, the qualitative interview, we get many more than 90. So there is a first process of reducing it to 50 to 90, we say. And we prefer to have 50 than 90. On the other hand, there is sometimes a bit of a pain to get rid of some of them, also for our clients. And this pain we try to address. And then it is, in the end, a question of costs. I mean, we can do 90. We did it. I remember a project a while ago. This was a project with 300 metrics. So basically, we split the questionnaire, and it was a huge project. And it was an overkill. We never recommended to do 300, but the client wanted to do it. So we did it. We fought against it, but in the end, they did it. So it's really a question. It's a trade-off question. We feel it's better with 50.
Okay, but what if you know, you said you split the questionnaire, so 50 to 90, you can have all your questions with every participant that you ask them, right? Or kind of like how many do you get into one question?
No. I mean, okay, maybe another answer. There are two ways to do it. One is panel interviews online. In online, you have a restriction of 15 to 20 minutes. You cannot go over 20 minutes in an online questionnaire. Online, 20 minutes is fine, but that's the limit. Then there is the alternative of phone-based interviews, supported by computer, but it's phone-based interviews, which gives you much better quality, but it's also much more expensive. This can make sense in a medical context, where you spend millions afterwards in the development, so you can also invest into phone-based. Now, if you have more than 50 statements, metrics in an online survey, you can split it, which means that you basically let part of the questionnaire go through all, like profile, screener questions, then you split, and then you bring them together again. And if you do that statistically right, you can build up a same conclusion.
So what you're saying is kind of for your 20 minutes time frame, you get 50 metrics you can do.
Yeah, we tested
so
that.
Then with 50, you have the possibility to ask every participant every kind of question.
Yes, this is possible. I mean, our questionnaires online, they range between 12 minutes and 17, I think, is the longest one. If it's complicated industry, then tends to be longer. More metrics tend to be longer, but that's the way we do it, and it works.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, nice projects.
Okay, last chance. Next time we'll have other cases. We're working hard on them at the moment. We hope to present you some very interesting stuff next time. But now is summertime anyway, and so we benefit from the lake and from the good weather. Hey, thank you all.
Thank you for being here.
Hope to be in touch with you.
Bye.
we're around. Just contact us if you want something or need something or want an exchange. All right.
Thanks and goodbye.
Bye.